For more than 2 decades, violent and extremist groups and militias have emerged in Nigeria. From the Niger Delta militancy, to Boko Haram, to farmers and herders clashing, to bandits and even the classic unknown gunmen. In the wake of these insurgencies, thousands of innocent and unarmed citizens have lost their lives, families and communities displaced. There's no doubt that the Nigerian government and even international governments and bodies have given to an extent an appropriate military and humanitarian response. However, that is only in the short term. Tensions rise, crises erupt, soldiers engage, normalcy returns, and soldiers leave. Does this solve the problem? Does this approach guarantee that it won't happen again? The answer to that is, of course, a resounding no. There's no doubt that this is a very complex issue, and the approach we've taken makes us dance in the same circle. But today, I want to approach this issue with a military concept. It is common knowledge that our military and paramilitary are best trained to respond to crimes and crises as they occur, and not to necessarily prevent them from happening. It takes the tremendous effort of a country's intelligence to uncover an incendiary. This boils down to how active our intelligence is. How many personnel of the State Criminal Investigation Departments or State Secret Service do we have on ground? How far and wide can they cover? In a country with more than 200 million people, how many of us serve in the armed and security forces? According to the information available to the public, there are less than 400,000 men and women serving in the police force, 371,800 to be exact. The NSCDC has 45,000 regular staff and 160,000 volunteers. In the Nigerian Army, Air Force, and Navy, there are currently 215,000 active personnel and 52,000 reserve personnel. In total, there are 843,800 personnel, both active and reserve, serving in the Nigerian military and paramilitary forces. This is for a country of over 200 million people. Less than 1 million serve in the armed forces. Now, compare that to the almost 1 million policemen in the US, let alone its robust army. The US is bigger and richer. I get that. Now, let us instead compare that to Switzerland, which has 120,496 active personnel in its armed forces, serving a population of only 8.57 million. This statistics has proven beyond doubt that the Nigerian security force is understaffed. As a country, we are faced with a sea of complex security challenges, and where there's much is expected. Our situation requires a complete change in strategy, an approach that will go beyond physical force and a robust military arsenal, one that will be holistic and more intelligent. We cannot continue to do the same things and expect different results. Should we decentralize the police and have state police? This approach is great and an international best practice, no doubt. But here are a few concerns with that. Will the state governments be able to pay the police force regularly and on time? In a country where the main income is generated by a few states and where other states almost rely solely on the federal government for monthly allocations to pay salaries, maintain government offices, and carry out projects, the story has only been of unpaid or delayed payment of salaries for civil servants. When you hear of governors delaying payments of salaries for up to 6 months, you wonder if the extra responsibility will make any sense. Here is the question. If you have a state police officer who has been given a uniform, a rifle, an ID, and hasn't been paid his wages for up to 6 months, what do you think will become of him? In our plural yet polarized states, the questions around party, tribal, and religious affiliations are just inevitable. If a governor should have total control of the police, what are the chances that he or she would not convert them to personal thugs? Thus, some people have argued that as a country, we are not quite there yet when it comes to fairness and objectivism. These and many more are concerns raised around the feasibility and sustainability of state police. Now, there are many possible ideas to explore around the issues of insecurity. But after a careful review of our current state, here are some suggestions. Number 1, data. It is quite shameful and painful to know that Nigeria, being the giant of Africa and the most populous black nation of the world and the largest economy in Africa, has no credible database. A majority of the millions of people on our streets have no single document that certifies them as Nigerians. Getting registered in Nigeria as a citizen is an option and is done on a voluntary basis. This is particularly the best reason for an increase in insurgencies. Personally, apart from my international passport and lately my voter's card, I have no national identity card. Guess what? I applied for an identity card since 2009 and I haven't been given till date. This makes it 11 years, 11 solid years since I applied for one. I, for one, do not trust the census that was conducted in 2006 because I was not counted. My brothers were not counted. So, for a start, there needs to be a central database that will carry the information of all citizens of Nigeria. Everyone must be photographed, fingerprinted, and properly documented. Our hospitals and morgues must on a daily basis provide documentation of newborn babies and dead people. This job should be given to serious and competent private companies, locally and internationally. Our civil service offices designated to do this cannot do it. No wonder we cannot account for those who were supposedly given some palliatives for COVID-19. It makes auditing impossible. If we have no database and proper means of identification, how do we differentiate between Nigerians and non-Nigerians? How do we take inventory of what we have? This means that anybody can walk into this country, commit a crime, and get away with it. By getting our database right, we will regain our pride among other nations and we will make Interpol easier and more efficient. This is in fact the only way we can partner effectively with international bodies to curb crimes and insurgencies. Number 2, mode of recruitment. Any man or woman, boy or girl, who wants to serve in the military or police force must go to school and get an education. We must raise the standard for our uniformed men and women. It is not acceptable that a person with no educational or reasonable ideological training should be accepted into any uniform job. Even when people are recruited, more time should be spent in giving them an intelligence and ideological training than any other thing. This is one of the ways we can begin to reduce the cases of human rights violations by uniformed men. Late Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso once said, bless his heart, if you give a soldier a gun and a uniform without some education or ideological training, you are breeding a potential criminal. This is another reason to enforce a compulsory basic education in Nigeria. An educated person is able to think rationally and less likely to commit senseless crimes than an uneducated person. Number 3, all Nigerians should be grafted in. Gone are the days when some people go to fight for the country. Now the fight has been brought home and closer. This affects everybody, both the trained and the untrained. All hands must be on deck. We can use a few nations as example. Switzerland has a mandatory military service in the Swiss army for all able-bodied male citizens who are conscripted when they reach the age of maturity. The women, however, can volunteer. National military service is mandatory for all Israeli citizens over the age of 18, although Arab but not Druze citizens are exempted if they so please. And other exceptions may apply due to religious or physical or psychological grounds. The National Service Amendment Act was passed on 15 March 1967, making national service compulsory for all 18-year-old male Singapore citizens and permanent residents. The Singapore government felt that it was necessary to build a substantial military force to defend itself. Conscription in South Korea has existed since 1957 and requires male citizens between the ages of 18 and 28 to perform compulsory military service. Women are not required to perform military service, but they may join the military. According to the laws of Taiwan, all male citizens 19 years of age on January 1st to 36 years of age on December 31st are obligated to render mandatory military service. They are considered draftees. You might think this happens only in Western and Asian countries, but let's come back to Africa, West Africa for that matter. Mali announced a compulsory military service for both men and women aged 19 to 35 in 2014, following tensions raised by Tuareg separatist group. What about Burundi? Although voluntary military service was introduced in Burundi in 1996, legislation made it compulsory in 1997. The service period is for 1 year, and it applies to all students, male and female, as they graduate from high school. Civics courses and courses on the use of arms are also offered to youths who do not have the opportunity to go to school. The Burundian government believes that these youths will provide better protection in the event of an attack by armed groups. Those who prefer not to wear the uniform are sent to the country's primary and secondary schools to help teach and coach young students. The Burundi government gives them a basic allowance to do this work. The times are changing, and we must change with it. I am suggesting that the National Youth Service Corps, NYSC, be made voluntary, and the age limit should be increased. Military and intelligence training should be made compulsory for all able-bodied men and women. At least, even if a person is to be exempted from the physical training for any reason, he or she should be trained on intelligence. If the majority of the country have a military and intelligence training, our villages and towns will be safer. People will be able to use their training to uncover some grand criminal plans. This is the only way citizens can begin to acquire arms legally, although with stringent restrictions, so that they can serve as ground forces that can defend themselves and others wherever a crisis erupts, even before the police arrives. Now, how can we achieve this? This training should be engrafted into the tertiary education. It can last anywhere from 6 to 12 months. There should be a compulsory service year for every student, even before he or she graduates and is awarded a degree or diploma. When we do this, we will have more people who will be willing to join the army fully for active service. This is one of the ways we can secure the future of this nation and defend ourselves from any possible invasion. Now, does this mean that this idea comes with no consequences and should be readily accepted by all? By all means, no. But the conversation should begin. These are just ideas that should be constructively criticized and carefully considered. I am aware that questions around sectional, regional, or religious marginalization may arise due to the plurality of this great nation. But it is only wise if we begin to act and at least take the right steps in the right directions. But know this, insecurity has become a part of us now. If we take actions, we may succeed. Mistakes will be made and corrections will be taken. But if we remain complacent and take no action, it can only get worse. We cannot continue to do the same things and expect different results. As think tankers, it is our duty to research and analyze issues as they occur. The goal is to provoke critical thinking and rub minds for solutions. Talk to those you know. Share these ideas with relevant bodies. Lend your voice and join the conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to the Think Tankers Network on YouTube for subsequent discussions. Thank you.